It really shouldn't come as any surprise that President Trump is planning to fight the election results, and he gave a speech, or I don't really know what it was, other than just priming the audience that all this cheating and horrific incidences and scary, tense, uh, cheating this, cheating that. It was just full of words that are there to charge his base with this idea that cheating was rampant. And from what I've seen everywhere, I can't really find any evidence of that. And it's, if you think about it on the surface of it, cheating on the votes is probably the worst way to affect the outcome of an election, because it's what everyone is focused on. It's what everyone is really paying attention to and making sure that it's valid. Because if it's in question, then you have something like this where it's just going to get challenged in court. Elections are decided before we even know who the candidates are going to be, for the most part. The power class and the gatekeepers all get together and they all have an idea years in advance what they're going to try to push, and then they use various news outlets and political punditry and all of that to kind of steer a narrative toward their objective, the person who is going to meet this objective. And it all seems very organic and natural, but it's not. It's quite deliberate. And if you're paying attention, you'll see it. If you're not paying attention, then you'll be susceptible to it. And I'm not saying if you're not paying attention, that's a bad thing. People have lives that they're trying to live. That's why we have a representative government, so we can live our lives, and then they can do the hard stuff of keeping society together. But that's not what they're doing, so now we have to really pay close attention to what's going on. So I think if this election says anything, it reflects that people are paying more attention, that their lives are being impacted more severely by the decisions of people who are so far distanced from them. And the feedback that we're getting from the media and from various groups, and it's just a big ball of chaos. So predicting the election results, like everyone's been saying, there's so many firsts, there's so many unprecedented things. We've never seen this before. We've never had this happen. At the end of it all, let me tell you what's going to happen. Nothing. Essentially nothing. We're going to have the same sort of business that we've had for the last 12 years. We're just going to have it for 4 more years. I'm going to play the president's speech here, and you can listen to how he primes the audience into believing that there's cheating and everything going on. If there is, he's definitely trying to be hyperbolic and just weigh on this and hype it up and put it out there into the cosmos, so people who aren't paying close attention pick up on these keywords, and then all of a sudden they form an opinion, a really strong opinion, based on just one person saying something. You have to have proof. You have to have evidence. You can't just make claims. You can't just make accusations. And then when you're done, you can't just run out of the room, leaving the reporters asking, are you just a sore loser? So let's listen to this.
No, which is a little strange. I challenge Joe and every Democrat to clarify that they only want legal votes, because they talk about votes, and I think they should use the word legal votes. We want every legal vote counted, and I want every legal vote counted. We want openness and transparency, no secret count rooms, no mystery ballots, no illegal votes being cast after Election Day. You have Election Day, and the laws are very strong on that. You have an Election Day, and they don't want votes cast after Election Day, and they want the process to be an honest one. It's so important. We want an honest election, and we want an honest count, and we want honest people working back there, because it's a very important job. So that's the way this country is going to win. That's the way the United States will win, and we think we will win the election very easily. We think there's going to be a lot of litigation because we have so much evidence, so much proof, and it's going to end up perhaps at the highest court in the land. We'll see. But we think there'll be a lot of litigation because we can't have an election stolen like this. And I tell you, I have been talking about this for many months with all of you, and I've said very strongly that mail-in ballots are going to end up being a disaster. Small elections were a disaster. Small, very easy to handle elections were disastrous. This is a large-scale version, and it's getting worse and worse every day. We're hearing stories that are horror stories, absolute horror stories. And we can't let that happen to the United States of America. It's not a question of who wins, Republican, Democrat, Joe, myself. We can't let that happen to our country. We can't be disgraced by having something like this happen. So it will be hopefully cleared up, maybe soon, I hope soon, but it'll probably go through a process, a legal process. And as you know, I've claimed certain states, and he's claiming states, and we can both claim the states, but ultimately I have a feeling judges are going to have to rule. But there's been a lot of shenanigans, and we can't stand for that in our country. Thank you very much.
You see how he just ignored all the reporters? That's pretty much how the president is to everyone and everything. Dismissive. It's what I say, and there's no questions that need to be asked, apparently. That's the impression I got from the very end of that. But one of the things that I was really impressed by was how he kept hammering away at an honest vote, a legal ballot, legal votes, honest people. We want honest, we want legal, we want things to be fair. When the president says that's what he wants, of course it's not what he wants, but more importantly, he's suggesting tacitly that those things aren't there, that we aren't having an honest vote, an honest count by honest people of legal ballots. So unless he can provide some proof of his claim, then he's again just priming the audience. He's saying whatever. And for the people that follow the president, there has to be some really strong confirmation bias that makes people not see the antithesis of what they themselves stand for. So we have people who are patriotic, they love America, they love freedom and free agency, and then they want to support somebody who wants to kind of take all that away and strip that away. And I'm really confused about how that process occurs. If you're paying attention, if you're not biased in some way, then it seems like these things would be really obvious. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I'm still trying to figure it out. But the one thing that I do know for sure is that people who support the left and people support the right, we are actually more alike than we are not alike. And that we are simply misunderstood by it's a deliberate thing that we're misunderstood. It's to keep us at one another. But we really want the same things. Honestly, we want the same things. We just have a different way of going about it. And then one side is poisoned, both sides are poisoned against one another in the lies and the misunderstandings and the priming and the confirmation bias. So that's something that if we could focus on the love instead of the hate, we might come out of this a little bit better. For the Christians on the right, the Christian fundamentalists on the right, you're supposed to love your enemy. And when the president vilifies half the country, in 2016, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that half the country didn't want President Trump as president, and the other half, by a slim majority, did. That still leaves half the people who didn't. And for one side, for the Republicans to go after the Democrats, that's fine, go after the Democratic leadership. But you can't lump the people into the Democratic leadership because they're not representing people any more than the Republicans really are. In their actions, they might say things, but they never really do it. So that's kind of curious to me that we can just dismiss half of the nation. And the same thing is true for people who now possibly have a Democratic president. Those voters They can't dismiss the other side. Half the country voted for Trump. Those are American citizens too. They have rights, they have concerns, they have lives that are just as valid as anybody else, just like the Democrats have all of those things that's just as valid. So when we pick sides, we can't just toss out the other side. They belong there too. They have a role, they have a piece in this, they have a stake in it. So this partisan kind of politics that we have of leaving the other side out, that's not going to work. We really need to work harder to be inclusive, to get everybody together in the ideas that we're trying to create here, which is basically liberty and freedom and self-agency. But we can't have any of those things if there are gatekeepers and barriers to entry and slave patrol and everything else that's making it hard for people to live their lives. It's really, really confusing. And then at the end, when the reporter asked if you're just a sore loser, I think we all know the answer to that. Of course, the president has a responsibility to fight for his constituency. So by challenging the election results, if there's grounds to do that, then he is doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing. But he's kind of disingenuous in that it's not any mismanaging or whatever. It's not rising to the level of fraud and voter suppression, voter manipulation that would warrant a recount or void the election. Nothing like that's happening. It's not even close to when Gore and Bush had their wrangling in court. It's not even that close. It seems like it's pretty far off the mark. So as far as things changing in 4 years, nothing's going to change. We're going to have the same thing, for 12 years. Now it's just going to be 16 years. The strategy is always a win-win one for the Republicans, especially the Democrats. I don't know why they can't get their shit together to do this, but the Republicans seem to be able to, no matter what the scenario, they always end up having a hedge. So if it's a Republican president, then they might hedge it with a Republican Congress or Republican Senate. Or if it's a Democratic president, then they're going to hedge it with the Republican Senate, or so that they always have a foot in the door. They always have some really powerful leverage that they can use to get things done. Now, when the Democrats hold the same exact position as the Republicans, the Democrats can never seem to get anything done. But when the Republicans have that position, they are unstoppable. So that's really curious to me. It almost seems like one side's working for the other, doesn't it? So I'm going to continue my coverage of this story here because I called this before pretty much anybody else. As soon as I started hearing the keywords and the priming of we want a fair election, I knew that the attempts to try to smear the election and void the results, I knew that process, that ball was already in motion. I mean, the president is absolutely desperate right now, and it shows. These are just acts of complete petty childhood desperation, because I think the president knows that once he's no longer president, he's going to have a lot of questions to have to answer, and he's going to have a lot of things to account for. And that's probably going to be really ugly for him over the next 4 or 5 years. So his battles are just starting, and this is the first one. So stay tuned. Hit subscribe, hit like, hit the bell, do all that if you want to stay informed here. Let me know what you think. This is the Broken News.